He sent his slaves to call those who had been invited to the wedding banquet, but they would not come. Again, he sent other slaves, saying, "Tell those who have been invited, 'Look, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and my fat calves have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they made light of it and went away, one to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his slaves, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his troops and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Then he said to his slaves, 'The wedding is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore into the main streets and invite everyone you find to the wedding banquet.' Those slaves went out into the streets and gathered all whom they found, both good and bad, so the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing a wedding robe, and he said to him, 'Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding robe?' And he was speechless. Then the king said to the attendants, 'Bind him hand and foot and throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen.'"
The gist of today's gospel. That's the bottom line. Welcome to the feast. I think in our day we call that the executive summary. A king is throwing a huge marriage feast for his son. Now, this is not some ordinary occasion like the bishops of the Anglican Communion at a tea party in the garden of Buckingham Palace. We were kind of overwhelmed when we were there because there were about 700 bishops and another 700 folks who were spouses and another couple of hundred who were staff and people. And we just thought this was a grand occasion, but just 2 days before we were there, the Queen had had a similar tea party on the same grounds for 10,000 people. So this marriage feast that we see here in the gospel was not like the bishops' gathering in Lambeth, but it was much more like what the Queen had done a couple of days earlier. This is not some ordinary celebration that happens at the palace, a time or two a month, several times a year. No, this is one of those once-in-a-lifetime events. The party unlike all others. The only people who are somebody are the ones who were invited. See, this is no occasion for the riffraff. This is no occasion for those people that are kind of outside the boundaries. These are for the people who are important. So the king sends out his servants to extend invitations to all of the really important people that the king wants to honor by bringing them to his party for his son, having all of the personal guests at the wedding feast, the likes of which the kingdom has never seen. But to the shock and horror of all, the important people who were invited by the king to this grand occasion were so important indeed, so self-important, that they blew off the king's invitation and did not go to the great marriage feast of the king's son. Now, think about that just for a minute. It takes a pretty cocky, self-absorbed, odd sort of person to respond that way to the invitation of the king. Now, most of us, even if we were not too fond of the king, are not likely to turn down an invitation to a party, especially the party of the century, at the king's royal palace. At the very least, I'd go eat the king's food and drink the king's wine. But in this case, those who were invited turned down the king's invitation. And the king was not too happy, so he sent some more of his servants out, not just with an invitation, but with a menu card. And what did did they discover? We're going to have roasted oxen and fatted calves and all the trimmings. Fine wine is going to flow like water. And there will be singing and dancing and merrymaking. Come, join the party. Not going to do it. We're not coming. And some of these folks were getting irritated by the king's repeated invitations. Imagine that. And so what did they do? They seized the king's servants and tortured them and maimed them and eventually killed them. You know, I think that's where we get the phrase, don't kill the messenger. They weren't there to do anything to these people except to invite them to be the honored guests of the king. Well, now the king, as you can imagine, is getting a little hot under the crown. And over the fact that these so-called important people were brushing off his gracious invitation. And what's more, now they're maiming and killing his servants. I don't suppose we can really blame the king for his response, can we? So what does he do this time? This time, he sends his army. Found those important people that had killed his servants and had them killed. And while they were at it, they destroyed their city and burned it to the ground. When all the killing and all the destroying and all the burning was over, well, there was still that wedding feast that somebody had to eat, that somebody had to enjoy. And so once again, this persistent king, He sends his servants to extend the invitation for the people to come and enjoy the banquet he had prepared. But you see, by this time, all the important people were dead. All the people who knew their own importance and held the king in contempt, they were gone by this point. So the servants had nothing to do but go out into the streets and find anyone and find everyone they could find, the good, the bad, the ugly, and brought them all one after another to this great banquet of joy and delight at the palace of the king. Now imagine for a moment how those who first heard Jesus tell this parable, how they might have heard it with their ears in that time. And we've heard this story of the wedding feast so many times, it's easy for us to miss the point, but how do you imagine those first people who heard it from the lips of Jesus might have thought about it?